Hello and welcome to week 44 of the Ray of Hope Crochet Along. And this week we're going to get started on our outer border. Okay, so to start this part you need to have all the rest of your pieces joined together. So you need all 20 of your outside rays all joined. You don't necessarily have to have the ends weaved in. I've left mine out, I haven't weaved those in yet. And that will actually help with counting the number of stitches in your outside border. But if you have weaved them in, it's not a problem. Right then, where do we start? For the rest of our border we're going to be using a 3.5mm hook all the way around. Now it's important we get our stitch count right for this. So just remember that for your triangular rays you're going to have 20 stitches across the top of each one, and for the rectangular rays you're going to have 14. So this is important to remember as we go round to make sure we get our stitch count right. So I'm using the same colour as I joined all the stitches together with, so I'm using black. And into any slip stitch around the edge you're going to join into the outside loop of the slip stitch. So working into that slip stitch border, and I'm just going to join in and chain one. Okay, and into that same stitch I'm going to single crochet. So this first round is nice and easy. It's just a single crochet in every stitch round, but when we get to the joins between pieces we're going to make sure that they join nice and tight. So you're only going to be working into the outside loop of your slip stitch border, okay, and just make sure that you have the right number of stitches in along the edge of each piece. So 14 for the rectangles, 20 for the triangles. Okay, so we're getting to the edge. I'll just make sure I've got my stitch count. 1, 2, 3, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13 and 14. Okay, so I'm going to make the stitch, single crochet into the last stitch of my rectangular piece, and now I'm going to slip stitch into the first stitch of my triangular piece. And this just makes sure that that join is nice and tight. And then into the same stitch I'm going to make a single crochet. Okay, so the slip stitch makes sure the pieces are nicely joined together with a nice tight edge, and then the single crochet is the first stitch for that piece. So I'm onto the triangular ray, so I now need to make the 19 stitches into this piece. Okay, so it's just single crochet into every stitch, just using that back outside loop of your slip stitch border, and then when it comes to the join between pieces, just after you've made the last stitch for that piece, just slip stitch into the next stitch, which is the first stitch of the next piece, and then single crochet in that same stitch. Okay, and that's all you do all the way around. And then once you get back to the beginning, just slip stitch into that first stitch. Okay, so I've got to the last stitch in the round, and I'm going to single crochet into there, and then I'm going to slip stitch into the first stitch that we started the round with. And that is the first round of our border complete. So you should have 680 single crochet. Okay, so for round 2 we're going to carry on with the same colour. So I'm going to start the round by chaining 1, and into the same stitch that we slip stitch into we're going to make the alternate turning chain. Okay, so for this round you're going to need stitch markers, because we're going to be marking 10 stitches around this round, and those 10 stitches are where we're going to be making increases. So we're going to be increasing so that we have 690 stitches at the end of this round. It's important that we have a stitch count that can be divided by 3 so that we can then start the pattern. So we've got these lovely colourful bubbles with the black V's, which is going to be our pattern to finish the border. Okay, so we're going to, the alternate turning chain counts as our first double crochet, and we're going to be working into both loops of the stitch for this round. And we're going to double crochet in the next 67 stitches. So you've got your turning chain, that alternate turning chain counts as your first double crochet, and we want 67 double crochet in total. Okay, so it's all just plain double crochet, and then in stitch 68 we're going to make 2 double crochet in the same stitch. So let's just pretend for a second I've just made 67 double crochet. Okay, so in the next stitch I would increase, and you just make 2 double crochet in the same stitch. Okay, but that second double crochet we want to pop a stitch marker in. We want to know where that increase is in our round. Okay, so you're going to have 10 increases in total. So when you've done your increase, you carry on and you make another 67 double crochet. After you've done your next 67, you'll make another increase and mark the second double crochet in that increase, and then carry on round. Okay, so a really simple row, and you're just going to be making double crochet in both loops. So when you get back round, we'll have 690 stitches. Okay, so I'm going to carry on with that round, and I shall come back to you when we get to the end and we start the next row. Okay, so I've got to the end of the round and I've slip stitched into my first stitch. So that very last stitch of the round I've got 2 double crochet, and that's the last increase. So you should have 10 increases all the way round and 690 double crochet in total. Okay, so for round 3 we're going to carry on with the same colour, and we're going to chain 1, and in the same stitch that you slip stitched into we're going to make the alternate turning chain. Okay, let's grab a stitch marker. Oops. Butterfingers. There we go. Okay, so now we're going to start setting up the pattern for the rest of our border. Okay, so alternate turning chain and then chain 1, and then make a double crochet in the same stitch as the turning chain. Okay, so now we're going to skip 2 stitches, and in the next stitch, all in the same stitch, we're going to make a double crochet, chain 1 and double crochet. So this round is all V stitches. This is the repeat all the way round. So double crochet, chain 1, double crochet all in the same stitch, skip 2 stitches and repeat. So double crochet, chain 1 and double crochet. And it's just V stitches all the way around. Now when you get to your stitch markers, it probably won't be exactly the same stitch, but in the V stitch closest to your increases, so those 10 increases that we marked, you're going to add an extra chain into your V stitch. So instead of double crochet, chain 1, double crochet, it'll be double crochet, chain 2, double crochet. And that's just going to add some slack so we don't get any cupping up of our border. But it's as simple as that for this one. So skip 2 into the next stitch, double crochet, chain 1, double crochet in the same stitch, and then skip 2 stitches and repeat. And then the stitch, V-stitch closest to those stitch markers where you marked your increase, just add an extra chain in your V-stitch. And you're going to do that all the way around. So I'm going to carry on with that, and I shall see you when I get back to the beginning of the row. Okay, so I've got to my last V, and I've got 2 stitches left. So from there I'm just going to slip stitch back into the turning chain that we started with, and that is round 3 complete. So for our next round we're going to switch to colours, but don't cut off this yarn because we'll be picking this colour up again later. So I'm just going to pop a stitch marker in there so it doesn't come out, and I'm just going to leave it to drop there. So just to make life a little bit easier, I'm going to turn back round to over here so I can show you the next part. Okay, so don't worry if this round's cupping up a little bit. We're going to sort that out later. Okay, so for the bobbles, nice coloured bobbles, all I've done for this is use up what's left from making the pieces. So I'm just going to use the orange for this one, and we're going to be joining this into any chain 1 space inside the V's. So I'm just going to join that in, and we're carrying on with the 3.5mm hook, by the way. I'm going to stick with this hook all the way around. Right, so we're just going to join in to the chain 1 space and chain 2. Okay, and in that chain 1 space we're also going to make a puff. So yarn over into the stitch and pull up a loop. Yarn over, back into the space, pull up a loop, and again for a 3rd time. So you should have 7 loops on your hook. Then you're going to yarn over, pull through 6 loops, yarn over, pull through 2 loops, and then chain 2. And then go into the next chain space and do exactly the same. Pull up another puff. So yarn over before you start, then into the chain space, yarn over 3 times, so you've got 7 loops on your hook, yarn over, pull through 6 loops, yarn over, pull through 2. And we're going to have this series of puffs going all the way around. So you'll always have a chain 2 between your puffs and a puff into every chain 1 space of your V-stitch. Okay, so now if I just, where have I got one? Right, if I go over here, so I kept my stitch markers in the stitches where I've got a chain 2. Now where we've got these chain 2, which is where our increases need to be, you're going to make 2 puffs. So you'll make a puff, chain 2, and then into the same space make a 2nd puff, and those are in our increases. Now because I was using scraps, or what was left of the balls for the border, I have at least 2 colours in every round. So when you're ready to change colours, I would do it before, or no, I would actually do it after making your puff. So you make your puff, so pull up a loop 3 times, pull through 6 loops, and then I would change colour in those last 2 loops. Okay, and that's when I change your colour, when you're ready to do so. Okay, so in this round I think I'm going to use the orange, and I'm going to use this yellow as well. And then I'll use some of the other colours in later rounds. Okay, so I'm going to carry on with that, and I shall come back to you at the end of the round. Back round to the beginning of the round, and I've done my last chain 2 after the bobble, and I'm going to slip stitch into the top of the first bobble. So we ignore the chain 2 and you slip stitch into the top of your puff stitch. Okay, so if you're not going to use the colour again in the next row of bobbles, you can cut off. If you do want to use the same colour, then you can leave it attached and then carry it up. Okay, so for the next round we need to go back to our first colour where we did all our V-stitches in. There's mine back there. So I'm just going to put that back on my hook. Okay. And I actually want to pull my loop through to the front. So we're going to work this next round in front of the bobble stitches. Okay. So you're going to chain 1, and in the same stitch that you slip stitch that colour in, you want to make the alternate turning chain. Okay, so you can take all your stitch markers out that you used for all your double puff stitches. We won't be making any more increases. The increase we made with this double puff will see us through for the rest of the border. Okay, so we're going to be making more V-stitches. So you've got your alternate turning chain, then chain 1, and in the same stitch make another double crochet. Okay. Now your next stitch is going to go between the V-stitch here. So you're going to bring up above the colour you made your bobble in, so we're going to include that in the stitch and make a V. So double crochet, chain 1, and in the same space another V, another double crochet to make the V, sorry. Okay, so you're working between, so there's the V-stitch there, V-stitch there, and you're working in between them. And that makes your bobbles really puff out in between that V. Okay, so your next one goes between the next two. Remember, you're working on top of your bobble row, and just make that V-stitch, and you're going to do that all the way around. Okay, so your bobbles won't pop through the V, they're going to pop up between the V-stitches you're making. So there's the V-stitch you just made with that hole in the middle. There's your chain 1 space there. And just going between the V's is what makes them pop. So you're going to do that all the way around, including in the middle of those 2 puff stitches. Okay, so those 2 puffs, if you pull apart, you're also going to make an extra V that will go into the chain space. Just get between those 2 puffs. Okay, so that's like an extra decrease, sorry, an extra increase, but we won't be making an increase in the next row around. Okay, so just bear that in mind. Otherwise you just carry on making V's in between those stitches all the way around. Okay, so I'm going to carry on with that, and I shall see you when I get back to the beginning. Okay, so working into these puff increases, the best way to do it is to move your puffs to one side so you can see the chain underneath, and get right in between with your hook and then make your V. chain one and do the other double crochet, and it's kind of making it right on top of the first one, and that just makes sure that your puffs end up nicely on one side and the other. Okay, so then once you've gone all the way around, you're going to slip stitch into the turning chain, and that is that round complete. And that also completes week 44. So we're going to carry on with the rest of the border next week and add a few more colourful bubbles. So I shall see you next week for week 44, week 45 even. Bye for now.